James Jordan and Peter Lightheart, they believed in biblical chronology, that which many creationists don't even accept. They believe that the chronology that was presented in Scripture was intended to be chronological, and that it is authoritative. Thus, they held, the chronology of the ancient world is mistaken. And so, I'm not going to go into this in detail at this point, but what I say to people is, if the Bible is completely true, what we should expect is we should expect massive amounts of evidence for the Exodus and the conquest and so on. But we should expect it dislocated from where archaeologists are looking for it. And the reason that we should expect it to be so dislocated is because archaeologists are working on the conventional chronology, and therefore they assume that we should be finding evidence of the conquest in the late Bronze Age, which they don't, and so they say it didn't happen. But if you hold a biblical chronology, and if you readjust the stratigraphy accordingly, actually things do fall into place. There is a destruction of Egypt, followed by a destruction of these cities, followed by a period of massive wealth in the kingdom of Israel and Judah, followed by its division, etc., etc. You do find this pattern, and then the question is, how can you internally adjust? How do you make sense of the internal logic of the dynasties of Egypt? And this is, in my opinion, a methodological thing. In other words, do we look for the pattern first and lock things in that way, and then we move from there to working on the internal coherence of the dynasties, which would be my preferred methodology, or do we try to make a chronology from the fragmentary evidence we have from Egypt, and then look at how everything else fits into that chronology? That's all I'm going to say on that. But they also believe in biblical chronology. Jordan, in his lectures, also pointed out that there were some really interesting features in biblical chronology. Let me just say, I've checked all this stuff out. I've done the calculations for myself now. So what I'm saying to you, I'm not just taking on faith in Jordan. I've worked through this myself. He points out, for example, that the temple was built 3,000 years after the creation of the world. Exactly. It's not that hard to work out the numbers. You just go to Genesis 5 and 11. You realize that the patriarchal period is 215 years, followed by 215 years in Egypt itself, which is what Paul says in Galatians 3, and how the church has historically interpreted it. Then you add the 480 years from the Exodus to the temple, and you get 3,000. And then you keep working from there, and you find the second temple is destroyed exactly 1,000 years after that. So that made me curious. It didn't alone convince me, but it made me curious, especially once I realized his numbers were accurate. Jordan has a 600-page series of articles on this, which I can send you if you'd like, so just ask me if you want. I can send you a bunch of Jordan stuff if you're interested.